Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open the engine that powers Bitcoin. It's a wild system that secures a global currency, not with vaults and guards, but with a massive planet-spanning lottery that runs 24/7. So how does it all work? Okay, so let's just jump right in with a puzzle, a really big one that's at the heart of all cryptocurrency. How in the world do you build a financial system, a bank for everyone, that has absolutely no one in charge? Well, to get our heads around this, we need to rewind the clock to 2008. The traditional financial world was in chaos, and trust was at an all-time low. And right then, this mysterious person or group, known only as Satoshi Nakamoto, drops a paper online proposing something completely radical. So what was this big idea? In a nutshell, it was to create a ledger, a record book of all transactions, but with a huge twist. Instead of one bank controlling that ledger, everyone on the network would get their own identical copy. To really get this, let's make it super simple. Imagine a tiny network with just 4 people. We'll call them A, B, C, and D. And let's say person A wants to send 10 bitcoins over to person B. Now, normally, A would go through a bank, right? But not here. Instead, A basically just shouts it out to the entire network. Hey everyone, I'm sending 10 bitcoins to B. And so everyone, B, C, and D, they all hear it and they all scribble it down in their own personal ledger. Of course, you can't just have a messy list of transactions flying around. To keep things orderly, the network bundles these transactions up into neat packages we call blocks. And here's the clever part. Each new block is cryptographically changed to the one before it, creating this long, unbreakable chain of history that everyone shares. And that, my friends, is the blockchain. This all sounds great, right? Super transparent. But it creates a couple of massive, and I mean massive, potentially fatal problems that have to be solved for any of this to actually work. So think about it. First, there's the trust problem. If we all have our own copy of the ledger, whose is the right one? What if my copy says one thing and yours says something slightly different because of a network delay? How do we agree on the single source of truth? And then there's problem 2, the incentive problem. Why on earth would you or I volunteer our computer's power and electricity to process and keep track of a bunch of strangers' transactions? What's in it for us? And this is where the real genius of the system kicks in. Satoshi Nakamoto solved both of these huge problems with one single, incredibly elegant solution, a competitive process that we call mining. Basically, the system turns keeping records into this giant global competition. It's a race. Anyone can join, and the winner of that race gets the right to say, okay, here's the next official block of transactions, and everyone else agrees to accept it. That solves the trust problem. We all agree to trust whoever wins the race. And that solves the why bother problem, because if you win this race, you get paid. You get to collect all the tiny fees people attach to their transactions in your block. And you get the grand prize, a big reward of brand new Bitcoin, literally created out of thin air at that exact moment. This block reward is actually how every single Bitcoin comes into existence. It's the only way they're made. And from day one, the system was designed with a hard limit. Only 21 million will ever be created, period. This creates a kind of built-in digital scarcity. This whole competitive setup has a name, proof of work, and it's called that for a reason. To win the race and claim that reward, you literally have to prove to the entire network that your computer has done a massive, and I mean a massive, amount of computational work. So when we say a difficult mathematical problem, what are we actually talking about? Well, forget advanced calculus or anything like that. It's much more like a global lottery, a game of pure chance and brute force computation. It's not about being smart. It's about being incredibly, incredibly fast. At the heart of this lottery is a cool piece of cryptography called a hash function. For Bitcoin, it's one called SHA-256. The best way to think of it is as a digital fingerprint machine. You can put anything in, a word, a whole book, you name it, and it spits out a totally unique, fixed-length string of characters. That's its fingerprint. And this fingerprint machine has this wild property called the avalanche effect. If you change the input just a tiny, tiny bit, like adding a single period at the end, the output fingerprint becomes something completely different and unpredictable. It's a one-way street, super easy to generate the fingerprint, but basically impossible to figure out what the original data was just by looking at it. Okay, so here's how a miner actually plays this lottery. First, they grab a bunch of new transactions that are waiting to be confirmed. Second, they grab the fingerprint of the last block to chain it to the past. Third, they add a random number, just a guess, which has a special name, a nonce. And fourth, they smash it all together and run it through that fingerprint machine to get a hash. That's one lottery ticket.
So what's the goal of all this? You're looking for a very specific kind of fingerprint, one that by pure chance starts with a whole bunch of zeros. The number of zeros is determined by the network's difficulty. Since you can't predict the output, the only way to win is to guess. You change the nonce, create a new fingerprint. Change it again, new fingerprint. Over and over, billions, even trillions of times per second.
Okay, but wait a minute. Computers get faster all the time, right? Moore's law and all that. Wouldn't this game just get easier and easier until it's over in a second? Well, the network is smart. It actually has a goal, a target it's always trying to hit. It wants a winner to be found, on average, just once every 10 minutes, not faster, not slower. That 10-minute window, that's the fundamental heartbeat of the entire Bitcoin network. It keeps everything in sync, from how quickly transactions are confirmed to the rate new coins are created. And to keep that 10-minute heartbeat steady, the network has this brilliant automatic adjustment system. Every 2016 blocks, which is about every 2 weeks, it checks its own pulse. If miners are finding blocks too fast, the network says, okay, game's getting harder, and demands more leading zeros. If miners leave and things slow down, it says, all right, let's make it a bit easier, and requires fewer. It's always course-correcting. So there you have it. That's the engine. A wild, global competition that creates trust without a central bank and literally creates currency right out of code. But it leaves us with one more giant puzzle to solve. How does the system stop somebody from just spending the same digital money twice? We'll dig into that problem in our next explainer.